Good morning, everyone. Today is the 10th of July. It's the second week of the month, and it's Monday, so we are going to go through our weekly market analysis. My name is Pedro, Senior Market Analyst at Alphachain, and in today's session, we are going to go through the different news that can affect the market for the week ahead, and also pay attention to how the market can react exactly based on those news, right? So that's usually what we go through. We cover FX. We usually start with the dollar index, then individual currency pairs. We also cover the US indices and also some European ones, including DAX, for example. And then we also pay attention to commodities, gold and oil in particular. And then we finish with crypto, in this case, Bitcoin and Ethereum. So welcome, everyone. Feel to share any comments if you do have any. So last week, right, it was the labor data week. The first week of every month, as you know, it usually finishes on Friday with the non-farm payroll. But before that, we have other labor market data being released. And in this case, all of them, they were released on Thursday, on the 6th of July. We started with the ADP non-farm employment change. We also had the unemployment claim, and then we had the job openings, all of them on Thursday. Right, and the biggest surprise, it was actually with the ADP non-farm employment change. It was quite high. It was at 497,000 new jobs, which is basically twice as much as it was expected from the market, which was only 226,000. And if you actually compare this number with the previous data, since it actually started to be recorded back in 2010, or even before that, it was the biggest number ever, excluding what happened just after COVID, right? When there was that big volatility in the data, people being unemployed and coming back with big numbers. If you exclude this data just after COVID, this was the biggest one, which shows some tightening in the labor market, which is exactly what the Fed is trying to fight, as you know, in terms of decision making to hike or not hike in the future FOMC meetings. At this point, expecting to hike in the next 26th of July meeting, right? And the market reacted to it, right? There was a big volatility on Thursday after this data came out. And we could see that, for example, in this services sector, there was a big number at 300, or the services sector were responsible for 373,000 new jobs based on these 497, right? Which shows also some strength in the services sector. And as you could see in here in the services PMI, that the number came out also last Thursday, it was a little bit better than expected at 53.9. Like, so we can see some strength in the economy in the service sector, opposite to the manufacturing sector, which was actually again negative. This data came out last Monday in here at 46, when it was expected 47.2. Like, so we are kind of showing the difference in the two sectors, in here, manufacturing and services in the US economy. Moving on, unemployment claims come out as expected around 248, so it's again back below these 260,000 unemployment claims that we are having like 3 weeks in a row, and now again back into this range of 230, 240 something. And then also the job openings, which was a little bit lower than expected, but still quite high. Like, and one of the things that you Fetcher Powell look at, as you mentioned during the last FOMC or during the last ECB forum panel that happened 10 days ago, pay attention to how many job openings there are comparing with unemployment people. Like, and at this point, the ratio is positive, maybe 1.2 or 1.3. Like, for any people that get unemployed, there is 1.3 jobs waiting for them in the US. So at that point, this helps to maintain the unemployment quite low. And then we had finally on Friday the numbers, like non-farm NFP being at 209,000 jobs, like slightly lower than 224 as the market was expecting. And in reality, it was the first time since May last year that the number was actually slightly below than expected. Since May last year, as you can see in here, started in here, basically you can compare the full bull bar with the maybe goldish line. It was the first time that actually the bar was below the expectation since May last year. In this case, interesting to see. All right. So again, unemployment is one of the main factors that the ECB, that the FOMC is paying attention to in order to make decisions in terms of hiking or not hiking in the next meetings. At this point, unemployment coming below as expected to 3.6%, and the Fed mentioned that is looking for the unemployment to, by the end of 2023, to be at 4.1%. That was the forecast in the last FOMC meeting. So those were basically the most important data points in the US from last week. It started quite slow. Then we had Independence Day, so US holiday on Tuesday, and basically the week the market just started to be more active on Wednesday and moving on until last week. Looking ahead and what we can expect for this week, right? So we are going to have CPI, right? It's going to be the biggest catalyst of the week. It's going to be on Wednesday, the CPI, which at this point is expected to go from 4% to 3.1%. So the normal CPI is decreasing at a good rate. The main problem is the core CPI, which is expecting to be at 0.3 comparing with 0.4 last month, which takes maybe from 5.3 to expecting at 5% the core CPI for this month, right? It's much higher than at this point the normal CPI, mostly because of the reduction in the energy prices or costs that we have seen comparing with last year to this year. So there you go, right? So it's going to be, of course, it still matters a little bit. However, the impact that the CPI data has having in the market has been reducing at it's been reducing. There's more important news and data points that the market cares about nowadays in terms of how the market reacts to it. So yes, it's going to be CPI data in the US, and then we're going to have PPI on Thursday, again another unemployment claims, and then it starts the Q2 earnings on Friday or on Thursday in particular, but on Friday it starts with some banks announcing, like we have Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, BlackRock, Citigroup, and a few others starting the Q2 earnings in the US, which is going to be quite interesting. And let's see in the next few weeks, maybe until the end of July, how well or how it's going to impact the indices in the US. While the focus on Q1, it was more in terms of the banking sector due to the crisis that we had in the smaller banks in the US. Most likely, there may still be some focus on the banking sector. However, I believe the main focus is going to be on AI companies. That those were the ones that have been pushing the indices to the upside in the big rally for the last 2 months or so. So let's see if there's actually value in these evaluations, or if it is a little bit of a boom or a little bit of a bubble created in that evaluation, and maybe there's going to be some correction going on in the US indices. This is something to keep an eye on for the remaining couple of weeks, for the next couple of weeks, in particular when you have the big tech announcing their earnings. It's going to be by the end of July, if not mistaken. Moving on for other news, this morning already had CPI in China being at 0%, even better than expected. PPI also showing some, actually increasing the numbers on the PPI over the year. Then you have unemployment in the UK, which is expected to remain the same. However, the average earnings to increase, which can be a concern for the inflation in the UK that we have had, in particular the housing market, the prices to be quite, where is it? 1 second. Give me a second. Yeah, the home builders like house prices in the UK are falling at the fastest pace since 2011, right? So that can be, of course, a concern in there, especially in particular when you continue to have the expectations of more hikes in interest rate in the UK. Even at least 100 basis points more at this point is at 5, at least to 6, if not even 150 basis points to 6.5%. Like the UK that still has a quite high inflation comparing even with the US or the Eurozone. Then we also have GDP, which we may start getting really close to a potential recession in the UK. Yes, overall, we're going to have also an interest rate decision in Canada, expecting apparently another 25 basis point hike. Like it has been remained the same for 3 months, for 3 meetings in a row. Last meeting it hiked by 25 basis points, and now apparently another hike is expected in here. And that's basically it in terms of the big news that you're looking for this week. So moving on to the charts and looking at exactly how the market has been reacting to this, we look at the dollar index, right? Can you see that the dollar eventually moved to the downside? We started the week quite slowly, as I mentioned, with the bank holiday in the US with the Independence Day last Tuesday, and then the big data point with the ADP non-farm payroll pushed price to the upside, but all of a sudden it got rejected. And actually last Friday with the NFP, we actually moved and the dollar and the big sell-off in here, and you may now target these lows in here. Right, we started having a little bit of indication that price would eventually move to the downside, especially after this big rejection here. It was at the end of the session last Thursday. So yes, NFP, we're expecting price and the dollar to move to the downside, and you start targeting these lows in here. You may even get below that, and you may start looking even for price to get a little bit closer to this level in here. Something to keep an eye on the dollar. So let's see what's going to happen in here. But yes, maybe at least to this level, and then you're going to make a decision to see if price actually is going to respect these lows or is going to break them in there. So that's something to keep an eye on the dollar index. Moving on to the US indices. So we did had a move to the downside on the S&P and Nasdaq as well. Basically, now US indices, we had a move to the downside, right? We fake out the highs from the previous week, and then on last week we just literally moved down. It was an interesting closing of the on Friday. Like price actually moved to the upside with the NFP right around 7 p.m. So basically a couple of hours before the closing, we actually had a big sell-off on the indices. And this morning already broke even Friday's or Thursday's low in the last week's lows in this case. So are we going to continue? As we mentioned, we may be within this range. So maybe that can be one of the final destinations in here on the S&P. It can even go below that level, below this low, and finally touch that support resistance level that is stay fresh behind, right? The highs from August. Basically, price never really touched that level. So there's a little bit of a space in there that price eventually can go and use it and maybe take these lows as liquidity. Nevertheless, there's maybe still something in here that price could use. So yeah, targeting below these lows, I think maybe that could be interesting for the S&P, and then let's see how price is going to react. Is going to kind of move on from here, or it's going to start moving actually to the opposite side and starting to turn in here. But main focus for this week is going to be within this range. Right? I want to see price navigating between this range. It was a nice little zone where actually price reacted from the highs. Could even go a little bit higher, but now we can even go lower. So yeah, trading within this range is something that we are going to be focusing on the S&P. A little bit similar to Nasdaq that is getting closer to this upper trend line that we have since the end of April. Like we had this big move to the upside for almost the last 3 months, And the same range kind of applies. The same range kind of applies in here on Nasdaq. We kind of have a little bit of a separation. Like we have these walls in here as important. We kind of need to break below these walls in order to push price eventually to this side. And then let's see if from here is going to go higher or not. We never really managed to break this high, so it kind of creates a little bit of a strength in here. Okay, gives a little bit more importance to these highs. Again, nice review reaction last Friday evening, just before the closing, and just similar to S&P, just managed to break a little bit below this level, right? So again, we are going to start moving or the focus on the US indices is going to start to be the earnings season that's going to start at the end of this week, right? So this is something to pay attention at this point. Before this, of course, the AI situation managed to push Nasdaq to the upside and US indices. Then, of course, a little bit of macro data, looking at unemployment, looking at some PCE data, CPI a little bit as well is going to have an impact, and what the Fed is going to do or not, right? So in the past, it used to tend that the Fed was following whatever the market was doing, kind of the market would know better than the Fed. However, it has been a little bit more of a different story this year or even last year as well. Like there's been some kind of divergence between what the Fed and what the market is predicting in terms of even next hikes or even in prediction of reduction in the interest rate in the future. Right, so we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see who's actually going to end up being really the discussion is going to be the Fed, and most likely more hikes, and actually start to see maybe more move to the downside in the indices, or is going to be kind of continue this momentum to the upside from the market in here. So again, US Nasdaq looking eventually to move more to the, again, within this range, we'll see what's going to happen. There's maybe more opportunities to look in there, and curious to see how price is going to react around this level in here. Are we starting to position ourselves, or the market is starting to shift a little bit? That's something to keep an eye on. For example, the break of this trend line may start opening a little bit those doors. In particular for me, I think I would like to see more of this wall actually being broken before having a little bit more of a bearish side in here. As long as this wall holds or at least this level, yeah, nothing really changes in this case. But yeah, maybe something like that could happen. Eventually, price could do something like this. That could be interesting in here. And then we have Dow. Again, similar. Dow, it was even more clean in this circumstance. Right, this was the range a little bit. We actually managed to break below these lows. Price went out the way, as we predicted as well. There was really good opportunity still to look for shorts around this level whenever price retraced this zone. And now there you go, just breaking these lows, and maybe we can even start targeting these levels and getting a little bit closer to this zone. Right, this was something that we were looking at on the Dow, and basically the move is done in here. Right, so it's going to be a continuation to the downside or a little bit of retracement now to the upside, but I think we can start targeting these lows in there. And then DAX finally managed to break below these lows. Yep, so it just continue, and maybe there's more momentum to the downside, even managed to break below these ones as well. So maybe there's a little bit more momentum to the downside. Maybe retesting this previous level support resistance can be a good trend continuation, or if by any chance, if price wants to have a little bit more of a deep retracement, it can. As an extreme, there's maybe even potential sell opportunities on the retest of these highs, using this high as a zone to fake out. This could still happen in there, but for now, yeah, maybe something in here. For me, I think my analysis is that DAX wants to go a little bit more to the downside after last week's move in here, or start opening the door to go even further down. One example of one situation that could happen, just similar to what happened in here on DAX, is that we had all these all-time highs in here, and price managed to took those highs before this resuming to move to the downside, right? So that is something that we have seen on DAX, and this is something that eventually could actually occur on Nasdaq. Like if the earnings season is actually quite good, we may have now a continuation to the upside, and we start targeting or start getting really close to these all-time highs from beginning of last year, right? End of 2021, beginning of 2022, and maybe before actually any big turn or bearish turning here on Nasdaq, we may go all the way to first take these highs, and only afterwards maybe have a move to downside, just similar to what we had on DAX. Right, this is something to keep an eye on. There's a potential that this move to the upside hasn't finished just yet. We kind of have a double top now. So yes, let's see. This level can be quite interesting in the bigger picture. If we start breaking slightly above that, I think we may have actually new highs before any turn to the downside, just similar to what we had on DAX. But again, this is for a bigger picture, maybe for the next quarter or so, or where to look for until the end of the year in there. So yes, that's basically for the indices. Looking and moving on for the euro index in this case, we had that big move to downside. It broke below these lows, kind of got a little bit closer to this extreme in here, and let's see now if the euro index is going to resume a little bit more to the upside or not in here. So yes, we still have the potential of retracing all the way to those highs. Even a zone above those highs, as you mentioned last week, is still fresh. Price can even go there. But this really good move to downside, maybe this still opens the door for price to start trading this range. Maybe this is something that we can start considering, even going a little bit more into that. We can have a deep retracement, and then maybe price can resume and move to the downside in here on the euro index. And the yen, right? The yen, it has been one of the currencies that we have been looking for the biggest move. We have been predicting this move for the last 2 or 3 weeks at least, which was the moment of a little bit of a correction in here, right? And in particular, maybe this range as a first zone, and then can even go higher. We're paying attention to this big trend line that we had. Actually, there were 2 trend lines that we actually talked last week that could have been a good reversal setup, and waiting for that confirmation. Like we had the break in here, and then kind of moved to the upside, price orange a little bit, and then we finally had a break to this upper trend for this bigger trend line that you had in here, and now we may continue to go higher. And all of this was triggered when the dollar yen reached 145. Like it was something that we paid attention to, and that we were waiting for. It took a few weeks until price got there, and when it did, all this starting to happen on the yen pairs. Like, so good recovery. This was something that we predicted. Target, as I mentioned before, can even be the test of this size, or you can start even going a little bit higher than that. And as you will see a little bit on the dollar yen, price actually already reached one of the targets on dollar yen. On the index, maybe there's a little bit more room to the upside. So those are in terms of the indices that we usually look at. Looking at the individual currency pairs, right? And we're starting with the euro dollar. Again, euro dollar similar to the dollar index. It started a little bit in the range, and now strong momentum to the upside during the NFP, and you feel all these ranges start targeting most likely these highs in here, expecting maybe these highs to break, and you start looking a little bit more higher, if not even eventually to go and resume a little bit more to the upside. This level managed to hold price. So we may have a little bit more of a momentum to the upside today, and then let's see where price is going to finish by today's session in order to look maybe for potential reversal or not, or if it's going to be some kind of continuation in here on the euro dollar. And then you have pound, even a little bit more strong, the move to the upside. Again, bigger picture, as we have seen, we may still be a little bit in the middle comparing with this level and that level, right? Maybe are going to continue to see this pound dollar eventually going towards that 1.3 in there. Meanwhile, we may have a little bit more of a retracement now, slightly a break to the upside on Friday, a correction a little bit. So let's see if we're going to start having a little bit more of a range. Price maybe can have something like this until it gets closer to that 1.3 mark in there. We're going to have quite a few data in the UK. So all the way from unemployment to GDP. So expect some volatility in here on any pound related pairs. And you actually have even euro pound in here, which is managing to hold its lows. And you may start even going all the way until here. We finally managed to break this trend line. So maybe we're going to have this range being created in here on euro pound, and maybe price can go a little bit more to the upside in here. We have the Aussie that apparently reacted a little bit to the inflation reports in China. We are within this range. Last week lows didn't manage to break this level, and last week's highs as well created Friday didn't manage to break this level neither. So we are here within this range. So let's see which direction is going to go to. In my opinion, I think we may still continue to go a little bit more to the downside. I think from these highs, I think we may go a little bit more, retesting these levels before any big turn. So let's see to which direction we're actually going to break in here. Looking at the yen pairs, like, and this was the one that we talked about, like, since the yen reacted from that 145, we just started this move, or this kind of distribution phase, moving to downside. You have a few confirmations in here, we price breaking some lows, and then just continue. It reached one of our first targets, which was the this compression zone that we had in here, and it can even go a little bit more to the downside at this point, maybe getting a little bit more close in here, or eventually even go all the way there. But the first target, it was exactly to fill this compression. This is a typical target that we can look always for. There is a high probability that price, once it kind of breaks into this level, that eventually is going to feel the compression in there. When we had kind of a similar setup like this across many yen pairs, just like we had on the yen index, but to the upside. So let's see now what's next on the dollar yen. Again, bigger picture. I still believe that this is still not the highs. I think we're going to get a little bit more closer to the upside. This is just a retracement before maybe the continuation to the upside in here. Nevertheless, it was a great potential setup that happened last week. We had euro yen as well. Kind of, we had this compression in here, start breaking those lows. So the move also occurred in here, getting to the extreme of this compression, with even the more room to potentially go a little bit more to the downside, maybe before resuming the move upwards. So this is something to keep an eye on the euro yen. Pound yen, a little bit more of the same, even though there's maybe a little bit more room to go to on this pound yen. So interesting to see if by any chance pound dollar is actually going to maybe make a little bit more of a move to downside. Maybe pound yen eventually can go towards that level. We did manage to break this low, so that may open the door to go getting closer to this level in here. So it's going to be quite interesting. On the other side, we kind of have this double top in here. So maybe even before filling out this, we could even go higher first, take out that this range in here, and then maybe making the move down. So that could be quite interesting. That's why something to keep an eye on. I think there's going to be quite good opportunities in here. Looking at the bigger picture on this pound yen, there's maybe even a little bit more room upwards before maybe making that move down. Yeah, I think price is starting to create a really nice setup opportunity for eventually the big turn in here on pound yen. Aussie yen just continued to do the same, like one of the most negative or bearish of the yen pairs in here, mostly because of the Aussie as well. So maybe targeting a little bit more closer to this level, something to keep an eye on. Moving on for the CAD, which also had the unemployment last Friday, which actually it was, what was the number on CAD? Like at 5.4%, slightly higher than expected, but the number was actually quite positive, with almost 60,000 new jobs being created in here. Like when we had a really strong move to the downside on dollar CAD last Friday. Nevertheless, in the bigger picture, I kind of look at it as a engulf to the upside from here. So I think we may have a continuation to the upside. I think we just got into this strong compression, and I'll be looking for targeting at least this 1.346 on the Barca. I think this is just a correction before maybe resuming the move to the upside. Question mark, is it going to go from here and resume to move upwards? Is it going to go a little bit more closer to the downside, or even take this low altogether, getting a little bit closer to here before making that move upwards? Something to keep a look at on the dollar CAD. In here. So moving on. Dollar franc Swiss. Like dollar franc Swiss, it has been one of the pairs that we have been waiting, and finally price resumed the move to downside. We were within this range for quite a few weeks, and we finally moved down because we have been actually bearish all the way since here. In particular, since we started breaking these lows, we have been bearish, and our target for the move to downside, it has been below these lows, right? Below this above low, actually going into this level. Like this is the zone that you are looking to start maybe looking for long opportunities on dollar franc Swiss. Bigger picture, this can even be engulf to the upside, kind of a break. Maybe there's a chance of price making something like this. Again, similar to the yen pairs, we don't need to rush into it. We actually just need to keep an eye and to see how price is going to react once it gets to this level, to see if we start having a confirmation that price is about to turn again, or by any chance if price just continues to show weakness, and in this case maybe even break below these lows and just resume the bigger picture move to the downside that you had basically since here, right? So let's see if that's going to happen or not, if we're going to go a little bit below that level, getting a little bit closer to these lows, or if in here there's enough in there to maybe start pushing price to the upside. Yeah, so it's going to be one to keep an eye on for this week. We have been waiting for it for quite a few weeks by now, and now price is getting finally close to that level. So it's one of the pairs to pay attention to for the week ahead. Gold just continues to be within the same range. We kind of have a few attempts to break to the upside, price gets rejected, and we are still within this range. So nothing really changed in here. Kind of broke a little bit above the trend line. Kind of use it already. Maybe can target a little bit more that zone, 1980s, maybe getting a little bit closer to this level. However, bigger picture, I think maybe there's a little bit more room to the downside as well, getting a little bit closer to this 1960, something to maybe look at. Yes, I believe that from these highs, I think price may wants to go closer to this zone before actually aiming to make a big turn in here. Again, we are within this range, so we're going to be paying attention and following gold to see which levels are broken first, to then make a decision on what to expect next. And then we have oil, right? So when you're starting to have this bullish momentum on oil, which is quite interesting to see what happened in here. From last week, we had a couple of meetings, OPEC members. Again, we have seen the production cut, in particular from Saudi Arabia and a little bit from Russia as well. Also, last Friday, the U.S. Energy Department announced its plan to acquire an additional 6 million barrels of crude oil for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, right, which is scheduled for delivery in October and November. Right? And this maybe was another factor to bring the price of WTI to the upside. This is something that the U.S. Energy Department has been doing. It's actually doubling the department's yearly purchase to approximately 12 million barrels. It has already done 3.2 million barrels, bought at an average cost of $72, which is okay. Basically, our price is at this point. Comparing with last year's, the average cost price, it was actually $95, and this is just to see how much the oil price kind of the energy in this case managed to go down comparing with the last years, and that was one of the main factors for the inflation number, the CPI numbers, inflation that we had last year. So there you go. So let's see if in particular oil in this case is going to resume and continue within this range, in this case, maybe looking to the downside, or finally, we are going to break above this level and starting to push oil towards to the $80 mark in there. So this is something to keep an eye on oil for this week. Moving on, and to finish with crypto, and in this case, Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? So looking at the crypto space, we had another attempt to break to the upside on Bitcoin, and we had a really strong sell-off just after that, as soon as we took these highs, and we are still trading within those structure from the highs since June or August or May last year. What we start to have in here is a lot of compression. It's a big range, right? We have this big range on crypto, and in particular Bitcoin. And what's going to happen in here? Question mark. Are you going to go all the way, find momentum, and break above this 32,000, and maybe start aiming towards 33, 34, or by any chance you are going to resume and maybe retest this level in here from 25,000 in here? Like just looking at the technical side of it and looking at the price action in here, it's not that often that we see Bitcoin making a big turn with this kind of move, right? We have all this structure, too many highs accumulated, and usually there's going to be some kind of impulse move to the upside in this case before any turn to the downside, right? It's kind of the collection of some liquidity in here. Even comparing with last summer, we had a little bit of a few highs, but then you had a big momentum to the upside before the turn, kind of in here as well, a lot of accumulation of highs, in here, a lot of accumulation of highs eventually before the turn. So just even comparing with the type of move that usually have, there's accumulation of highs a little bit, but usually then there's a big momentum before actually that turn to happen, right? This is kind of finding this range, letting people fight price in here, the bears and the bulls fighting for price, but eventually before any big turn, I'm actually expecting some kind of momentum, and not just a week on a daily time frame or on a 4-hour time frame, actually maybe a bull candle in here for them to be rejected. Now we may go down first, we may retest this level first, but eventually to actually take these highs, I'm expecting maybe some kind of a move in here to completely shake all of it in here. Maybe again moving higher, and then maybe we have a correction, and maybe we can start aiming towards a little bit more of these lows before maybe aiming for another move to the downside. There's going to be some different plays that can happen in here, and they're going to be paying attention to them as well. Looking at the lower time frame, yes, there's maybe still selling opportunities at these highs. There are some zones in there that are quite interesting. We do have this break of a low, so that actually can maybe go a little bit further down, and we are within this range at this point. So maybe the break above that can target these highs at least, or we can start even going a little bit lower, and you can even have this level in here on Bitcoin to look at. So that's a little bit of what you're going to paying attention to for this week. We're starting to be within this range for the last 2-3 weeks at this point. So let's see when they're actually going to have that momentum to happen. But yeah, for this week, we may have another retest in there, move to downside, and let's see for the bigger picture. That's when I'm expecting maybe a bigger momentum, a bigger candle in here before maybe the turn to occur. Looking at Ethereum, a little bit more of the same. Like Ethereum, I even like more the highs in there. That price could even go a little bit more towards that zone before making a move to the downside. That would be interesting without the need to break any highs. In this case, we are starting to accumulate a little bit of this level, so it could even break a little bit these lows, maybe fake out that and then go. That may happen whenever Bitcoin makes that move to the upside. And even looking at the crypto total market, it could take also whenever price goes there. It's going to be interesting before maybe moving to the downside. So I'm curious to see in here whenever price reacts to from this level, what Bitcoin and Ethereum actually are going to be doing around that zone, because this can actually be a good selling opportunity, or expecting price to go down from that zone in there. Or the opposite, or actually this level kind of holds, and actually then it's going to be used as a long opportunity from here. So this is just something to keep an eye on in the crypto and Bitcoin and Ethereum in particular. For example, even Savannah. If you do guys like to look at Savannah, for example, there can be quite interesting scenarios in here that you can look at. For example, yes, there's been a really good reaction since the beginning of this year at around 7 or 8 dollars in there. There's a few scenarios in here. Price can, for me, even if you break above these highs, I'm not going to be turning bullish. I'm going to be turning super bullish. Is if we break above this level, then maybe can aim to go towards the $70 mark in there. Meanwhile, we can fake out these highs and actually we can have a move to downside towards this level in here. So this is something that we can even look for. Maybe from here can be an interesting zone to look for a good long opportunity on Savannah. But yes, paying attention to this level in here, it's going to be interesting to see. If this level holds, we may continue to move down. If this level is taken, then even a deep retracement here is going to give even a bigger confirmation that maybe price then wants to go all the way to feel this compression in here and starting to get towards that $70 mark, right? This is just a tip to look for maybe in a bigger picture for Savannah. And this may take a few weeks or months until it all plays out. With that being said, guys, thank you again. Focus again for this week is going to be CPI. We're going to start the Q2 earnings season on Friday. Is the dollar going to resume to move to downside? That's going to be something to keep an eye on. Are the indices starting to create this bearish momentum, or is going to be a resume to move to the upside by the end of the week? Which side of the range are we going to break on the indices? That's going to be the main point to look at. Like, are we going to break above this level or below? That's what we're going to be looking. Oil as well, it's in an interesting range, interesting top. Is it going to break above or resume to move to downside? And crypto as well, which direction? We are creating, we can see that at this phase or at this stage, many assets are starting to create some ranges. So this, maybe it's a little bit of indecision or some accumulation to continue the momentum that the price has created before that, or are we going to start shifting and having some kind of correction in the market? This is what we need to pay attention to in order to position ourselves accordingly for the next few weeks or remaining of the summer, or even until the end of the year. So yes, these are interesting moments, and it's something to keep an eye on because we are going to be able to identify those clues as they occur. With that being said, thank you very much. I hope you guys have an amazing week. I'll see you next Monday. Bye-bye.